The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics welcomes you to Adding It All Up, a podcast created by and for mathematics educators and teachers. Join us each month as we explore current topics, insights, and emerging trends with thought leaders in the math community. And now, the hosts of Adding It All Up, NCTM President Kevin Dykema.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Adding It All Up. Today, we're diving into a super exciting, game-changing topic, artificial intelligence in mathematics education. We know it's starting to make some inroads into our classrooms. We can think of the tools that are allowing the students to respond differently and interacting with the students differently in ways we may not have seen before. It's pulling from these huge data sets. It's allowing us to tweak some of our problems to better match the students' interests. But it's not here to replace teachers. There's still a role for the teachers, so we don't need to worry about losing our jobs because of artificial intelligence. In fact, there are some tools that may allow us some of that time that we want to be able to really interact differently with some of our students. So today we're going to spend some time thinking about artificial intelligence in mathematics education. We know it's a topic that we've all been starting to think about. Some of us are further along in our journey than others. And today we have a wonderful guest to help us start to figure some of this out and to help us think about what do we need to be thinking about. So joining us today is Donnie Piercey. Donnie is a fourth grade teacher and a former Kentucky Teacher of the Year. Donnie, we're so excited to have you here to share your insights into AI in the classroom. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Kevin, thank you so much for having me on. I feel like I've taught long enough that now I have to start counting on my fingers, if you know what I mean. It doesn't really work anymore, but this is my 19th year of teaching elementary school here in Kentucky. As somebody put it the other day, and since this is a math call, I feel like this works. If I round up, I can retire, but no chance of me doing that anytime soon. But yeah, and for the past 3 to 4, I guess it was since November, October, December of 2022, that's when ChatGPT 3 made its big debut and everybody in education realized maybe we should start paying attention a little bit to artificial intelligence and some of the roles that it may starting to play in not only outside of school, but also directly inside the classroom. That I immediately started to think, hey, what are some ways that myself as an elementary school teacher or a high school teacher, what are some ways that we can start to integrate AI or artificial intelligence directly into our instruction, or at least into our classrooms to better help our students master and understand content? So it's definitely been a wild ride over these past few years, especially, but it's definitely been fun, kind of given that chance to play around and tinker with some of these apps and things that are coming out.
And we're so excited that you're willing to share some of your journey with us today. So for a teacher who's saying, hey, I'm just starting to dabble in this thing called AI in math education, do you have any tips, any ways that we might be able to begin to integrate some of these AI tools into our math classrooms, into our math lesson?
Yeah, so I always like to remind people that, if you go to a site like ChatGPT, which again, you can just Google that. If you've never made an account before, you can go. There's other sites that exist like Google Gemini. That's another one, Google's AI kind of chat model that they have. Microsoft has one, Microsoft Copilot. You can just Google that, which is ironically Googling a Microsoft product, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say that. But you can go to all these sites and you can make free accounts, right? And so I think for a lot of teachers, a lot of people in the public in general, you need to remember that with all of these AI tools, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Gemini, you're not going to break them, if that makes sense. I know sometimes when we think of AI, we think of Terminator 2 and we feel like the ending of the world, but it's not like if you jump into these AI bots or these chat bots, if you start to type in something, it's not like all of a sudden your toaster is going to come alive and start walking around taking it. So I say all that to remind you that probably the best way is to just dive in and check it out. One thing, and again, I'll talk more about this as kind of this recording goes on, but if you make an account with OpenAI, that's ChatGPT, and you go to the site, right down at the bottom, there'll be a little text box down there, and you can ask it to do anything for you. Maybe you are like myself, you're an elementary school teacher. Again, I'm self-contained, so I teach all subjects, but particularly in the math classroom, maybe man, I just need a sample problem that's aligned to this standard. And so guess what? when you go to ChatGPT, you can say quickly, hey, can you create a problem for me at the 4th grade level that's aligned to this Kentucky math standards? And you can use the numbers and the codes if you want, or you can just copy and paste directly from a site, or you can even say, hey, we're doing perimeter and area. Can you give me some questions, like a 2-part question? And guess what? It'll create a problem for you. Right. So, and not a problem, the robot side of thing, a problem more, it can give you that sample stuff. So again, as an educator, if you've never gone and messed around with this, it still blows my mind some of the things that these AI chat websites can do beyond just making test problems, but from everything from making up song lyrics to answering quick questions or creating sample responses that we could kind of bring into our classroom. So probably I would say, like I mentioned, just go in, make a site. If you have a nerdy tech teacher in your building that you know uses this stuff all the time, they're probably really excited to talk to you about to talk to someone else about some of the ways that they've used it. So definitely recommend just diving in and just checking it out, see what it can do.
There's some people who are skeptical and like, this AI fad's going to go away and the AI is not for me. It's bad. It's evil. How can you, and that's from the teacher perspective, there are teachers who are thinking that. What might you do to help ease their concern? Are there any tips that you can give for somebody who's really skeptical and say, hey, it is worth trying out?
I always start with this. The pencil, it's not going away. And the dry erase boards and all this stuff, like especially as someone who's almost taught now for almost 20 years, guess what? We still have pencils in our classrooms. We still have to occasionally like get up and do some dry erase boards in our small group time to help students. Heck, today we were just doing some regrouping with subtraction, borrowing from zeros, and so that's those kind of activities. I think it's important to realize that even though some of the things that an AI is able to complete, whether it's taking a picture of a division problem and it'll show you step by step how to solve it, or give you an explanation of, I played with this the other day. Again, I know nothing about advanced calculus and differential equations, but you can screenshot a differential equation, multiple choice question, and not only will it tell you the correct answer, but it'll also explain to you why the other ones were incorrect. I mean, that kind of stuff's amazing what it can do. But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that even though all these tools can do that, we as teachers, guess what? We still have the opportunity to work with those students one-on-one. And there's lots of sites and things out there that, they're meant to be tutors and they give students kind of that immediate feedback. And we can chat about some more in a bit, but that gives students that immediate feedback if they get a question wrong, or maybe they're typing out a response and the students can't understand why this scored me a 3 instead of a 4. Like AIs can be trained to give that specific rubric, give that specific feedback based on a rubric. But guess what? Ultimately, I am the one that is responsible for the student learning that takes place in my classroom. A few weeks ago, I was talking with my students. There's some AI tools that we use where the students will answer a question and then the AI will tell them, like, yeah, nope, or almost there, keep trying. But I always tell them, yeah, yes, it can do that. But guess what? At the end of the day, you're not going to receive a grade unless I've seen it first. Like I'm the one who ultimately should be, as the educator, should be figuring out like, okay, how close are you to mastering this content? Because once I see where they are, that's when I can start to do that differentiated instruction and to make sure that during that small group time or whole group time, when I can tweak what I'm doing to really help them master the skills that we're working on.
It gets me excited to think about, implementing it more fully into my own classroom. So I think as we've talked a little bit already today, we sort of see two different uses for AI tools, sort of from the student end, then the teacher end. Let's go with the student end for a little bit. Do you have any examples? You shared a little bit there that some of your kids know some of the AI tutoring and some of that stuff. Are there any things that you see from the AI that could have the potential that students could get really more excited about mathematics?
Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a lot of apps. I mean, we'll kind of dive into this. I know sometimes when teachers listen to these things, they're like, wait, just show me something new, like a site or a tool or something that I haven't heard of before. And a lot of these AI apps that are starting to come out, a lot of them are based on OpenAI, or that's ChatGPT, its model. So basically what these coders are doing is they've coded the site, they've coded this, but it's using like ChatGPT they train that model in a way to give students specific feedback on like a rubric. So one of my favorite tools that I use, and it's been out for about a year now, it's called Snorkel, Snorkl. If you do a search for it, it'll pop up. It is the best use and the easiest use that I've seen so far of a site where the students, especially in math class, can not only construct a response, but me as the teacher, I can feed it a rubric for each question that I give the students. I can tell the AI, hey, here's what a 1 looks like. Here's what a 2 looks like. This is what a 3 and a 4 looks like. Feed that in. And then after the students construct their response, they have like this whole whiteboard space where they can draw. They can even like turn on the webcam and hold up something that they drew on a dry erase board. They can label. There's even a voice feature where they can explain what's on the screen, right? I did this, I regrouped this, here's my proof, and they'll walk through it step by step. And then after they've constructed their response on this whiteboard space, the students submit, like there's a turn in button, and then it takes about 30 seconds, but on the right, the AI, because remember, you've shown it the rubric. You said, this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3. The AI will then break down, hey, probably, and usually it says probably, because remember, ultimately, as the educator, I'm in charge of learning, and this is really just a robot, right? That's all it is. But it says, like, probably this is your score right now. It's a 2 out of 4. It's a 3 out of 4. But then what's fantastic is down below it, it gives the students specific feedback based on what their response was. It's been trained to not give away the answer, right? So it's not going to say, hey, you said the area was 17 when it's actually 27. It's trained not to do that. But instead, it asks them like, hey, do you remember area? It's length times width. So maybe instead of adding all the sides together, you should do this. And again, it's all based on like the rubric and things that you feed it, but it can also create rubrics for you, which is really cool. But then what's great about the site, and this is the things that my students have loved, when they submit their response, because remember, the AI, it's supposed to give them that specific feedback. So what they can do through Snorkel is then there's another button that says submit another response. And the students then have the choice to either add on to the response that they had. If it says like, you scored a 3 because you were missing this, well, the students can go in and just add to it. Or if they want to start from scratch, if the AI is like, dude, you're a 0 right now, you're way off, they can start fresh all over again and use that feedback. But what's great about Snorkel is when it's all said and done, remember, I get access to all their little whiteboards and things that they create. So I can actually go and see like what their changes that they made were to it. And then ultimately I can go in, take a look. Maybe the AI scored them a 3, but I've looked at their response. And I'm like, this is definitely a 4, right? Because AI, as cool as they are, they're not perfect. So it also lets me go in and make those changes as it needs to see fit. But super engaging. But there's also still that cool factor to it, where if you've got a 10-year-old in your classroom or 13-year-old in the classroom, they've seen some of this AI stuff that's been out there, and it's easy to use, and the students can just roll with it, and it gives them that specific feedback.
Make your plans for the NCTM 2025 Spring Conference in Kansas City. Formerly known as the NCTM Regional Conference and Exposition, we've updated the name to better reflect the nationwide appeal of this highly anticipated event. View sessions and register today at nctm.org/KC2025.
So thanks for sharing a little bit about Snorkel, and I'm sure there are lots of other AI tools very similar to that are working from the students. Let's talk about from the teacher perspective then. I don't think we want to give the message then AI is going to replace the teacher, and the teacher, you don't have to do anything. Snorkel will do all of your work for you. These other tools will do all your work for you. You can just back, relax, do all kinds of other stuff. So how do you see some of these AI tools? What do you see the role of teaching with some of these AI tools that will do some of the work that we may have had to do in the past on our own, that now AI can do some of that work for us?
Well, I think it's important to realize that this idea of being scared of computers taking our jobs, like think when Google first came out, when YouTube first became a thing. Remember, there's all this rage about kids can just watch 7 hours of videos. Well, guess what? If you don't have that teacher in the classroom or that person, that human being that they can go to ask that specific feedback question, it's just another thing, right? It turns into them staring at screens for 7 hours. So because of that, I definitely do believe that while AI, it's incredible, And it's also important to realize that where we are now with AI, we're kind of at the, I'm going to use a late 70s, 1980s metaphor. We're kind of at the Atari 2600 of AI, right? That video game system's like, wow, this is so cool. But knowing that there's other things coming that will only make our jobs as educators easier, more efficient, et cetera. But just because it makes our jobs more efficient, that does not necessarily mean that we're going to be out of a job. As a matter of fact, I feel like one of the big benefits of AI is a lot of those things that we as educators are important parts of the job, but let's be honest, sometimes like they take a lot of time. Because AI is able to do a lot of those tasks, it gives us a lot more time when we can sit down and work with that student who's struggling on learning how to use exponents properly. Oh, no, remember you keep multiplying when really you're supposed to multiply it by this many times. That's probably one of my biggest hopes with AI, that we can figure out different ways that it helps us be more efficient as educators. So that way, when we come back into the classroom, when, we start to disaggregate all of our data and we see where our students are struggling, the different things that we can do to help teach them, because it makes that side of things so much more efficient, we can use that extra time that we will have to really just help our students master content all the more.
I appreciate that notion of time, because as I work with teachers all around the nation, as I work with teachers in my own district, always that time factor that we feel like we never have enough time to get everything that we want to get done. And there are definitely some AI tools out there that will help save us some time so that we can devote to that time that we used to spend doing that to really interacting with the kids. And as you said, spending time sitting next to that kid for longer than what we would have done 5-10 years ago, because now we have that extra time to really dive in and find out exactly what that kid is already knowing and to be able to build on those strengths. So I think about AI as I read headlines and different articles. There's this big buzz around, AI is going to personalize learning. What do you think that's going to look like in terms of AI? And do you think that's going to become a realistic thing from your perception? How will AI personalize learning, and what does that all entail?
I feel like that phrase personalized learning, it's almost turned into like the next edu jargon. Like everybody says it, but if you kind of ask someone what it means, it might vary from one building or district to the next, like what that idea of personalized learning might actually be. As far as the AI side of things, the idea of personalized learning, when I think of, I know a lot of people are familiar with Khan Academy. They have an AI tool that's built into it called Khanmigo. And the idea behind it, it's almost like an AI tutor, except it is one of the best ones that I've seen that's out there, where if students are working on a problem, maybe it's, they're working on, I don't know, I almost said balancing equations, but working on something where there might be some higher level stuff where, maybe their parent that's there might not know how to help them. These AI tutors are trained to give the students specific feedback that is at their level, right? So if they're at the 4th grade level, they'll explain it in a way where it's like, if you're a 9-year-old, this will walk you through how to go ahead and solve this. However, I also think that that's not for everybody, right? Definitely in an ideal world, there's that cool factor to this. We're like, man, look, I've got 27 kids in my class and look how excited they are to all be doing these practice problems on a computer. I don't know if that's the case, because if it were, when everybody got Chromebooks, guess what? We would have solved, I use that term loosely, solved that problem then, because there still has to be that teacher in the classroom, right? There really does. The AI tools that we use are not going to be the things that assign work to students. The AI is not going to be the thing that calls the parents after school to let them know about, hey, guess what? They've been working on their 12 multiples and they finally got it today. So now we can move on to, simplifying fractions. And I'm so excited some of the growth that they've seen, right? Because while the AI can do a lot, ultimately we as the teachers that are in their classrooms, we really need to be the ones who are using these tools in an effective way. And when you partner the classroom teacher and, again, Snorkel, Khanmigo, whatever AI tool that you're using together, that's when you really start to see that personalized learning take place.
And I appreciate that notion of, hey, just putting a screen in front of it's not going to revolutionize, and not all the kids are going to be able to do that. And I was at a conference this summer, and they showed a headline from 19-somethings where they had a television screen and people thought that was going to revolutionize TV, that kids would just sit and watch the TV screen and do that. So we have these generations of new technology coming out, but I think it really comes back to that role of that teacher, that we want that good, solid teacher who's in the classroom, building relationships with the kids, being able to sit down with a student, figure out what the student knows, doesn't know, where they are with that, build those relationships, encourage them along. The AI tools aren't going to be the encouragers. They're not going to be able to form those same types of relationships. So let's figure out, how do we use some of these tools so that we can, as educators, use that. Many of us went to education. Many of us didn't go into education so that we could sit and grade papers. We chose to go to education because we're passionate about working with the next generation of students, and we want to be able to do that. So I think about AI, we want to make sure that it's not just for some kids, that it's for all kids. And we know that not all students have the same access to technology. Maybe during the school day, many of them have the same access, but when they go home, there's different levels of access to technology. Do you have any ideas of how might AI benefit every single student? What can we do to make sure that we're using these tools equitably?
I'm coming at this from an elementary school perspective. So all the big AI chatbots like ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, and a lot of districts, and I'll be honest, I think wisely, as we're starting to figure out how to use these tools, a lot of school districts have opened these things up for staff, but not for students just yet. To go back to the YouTube analogy from earlier, like I would not be surprised, just like with YouTube, if, okay, we're just going to open this up to teachers, and then we'll start to open them up for students more. Wouldn't be surprised if, just like YouTube, how YouTube and Google, how those sites went, if we start to see that more. Again, not entirely sure that's a good thing just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're starting to see more and more of that happening. But as an elementary school teacher, just about all these big chatbots they're not allowed to use them. You got to be 13 or up to use them, right? So on the elementary school side of things, like I'm not going to hide from the fact from my students that these tools exist. Like they know I love technology. They've seen some of the work that I've done. Heck, I built an arcade in my classroom, and we can definitely talk about that in a bit. And we kind of constructed it and did all this, but using AI to kind of put the whole thing together. But at the end of the day, my job as a teacher, when it comes as an elementary school teacher, is to model for my students. Well, one of my jobs, not my only job, is to model for my students some of the ways that they can use AI once they leave my classroom. Because I know a lot of them, they've seen on the news, like, no, AI can just answer all your test questions for you. AI can do this. It can do college applications. It can do blah, 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 which again, it can, right? But as an elementary school teacher, I want to model for them some of the different things that they can use when they get older or go home and with their parents. They can use those tools to better themselves, to learn, to create, to almost have, back to our personalized learning metaphor from earlier, to almost have like that personal tutor, that person who's with them. It's not a person, but that thing that they can go to ask questions about, hey, I'm trying to get this code to work, or hey, do you think that getting this error message on this thing that I'm putting together, can you help me with this, right? Or even take a picture of it and kind of roll from there to show them what it can do. So that way, once they leave my classroom, they have a much, much broader sense of the capabilities that AI will have, especially as they move to middle school, high school, and college and beyond.
So, Donnie, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that math teachers are going to face with bringing AI into the classroom, and how might they begin to tackle those challenges?
Well, I mean, I think this would be a good time to talk about the student integrity piece. There's a lot of people who work in the ed tech space that, I don't want to say they ignore the student integrity issue that comes along when you start to use AI tools in the classroom. But I'll be honest, like I think that it's an important conversation to have. I do believe that as a classroom teacher, if you give an assignment to students and all they're doing is just taking a picture of it or copying and paste it and throwing it into ChatGPT or Google Gemini, whatever, and having it create a response and then do no thinking of their own and then just paste it. I know a lot of people say like, well, maybe it's time to change assignments. I mean, maybe, but at the end of the day, when students are in your classroom, they're in there to try to figure out how this stuff works, right? To learn this content. And if all they're doing is copying and pasting, granted, you could argue that they're learning maybe keyboard shortcuts. I don't know. But at the end of the day, like I don't just want these AI tools to be used for that, right? So one of the biggest challenges that teachers will start to face, and I'll be brutally honest here, is once you realize all of the things that it can do, it's almost like learning not to rely on it 100% for everything, right? Because if you're a classroom teacher and like, okay, my students today, I know we're introducing long division with decimals, and I just need 20 practice problems that we're just going to do on the overhead projector. Again, apparently it's 1997 on the document camera or on whatever, giving them a chance to just create it and then boom, and then copying it and passing out to your students, and you're doing that. I mean, these AI tools can do that. And it can do it in a matter of seconds, and you'll get practice problems. They honestly, sometimes, let's be honest, you just need them. But at the end of the day, if that's what your math class or that's what your classroom looks like every single day, I mean, if that's the routine, that's going to get boring really. And I think every teacher would agree that would get boring really, really quickly. Lots of online math curriculums out there that have tons of practice questions that you can assign to your students every single day in class and then every single night for homework. But if you are never up at the front of the room teaching or figuring out, working with your PLC, trying to figure like a creative way to help your students understand how to solve for X, then guess what? Like, that's going to get really boring really, really quickly. So I guess in one sense, one of my big fears, and I recognize this might be an overblown fear, but almost like relying on AI too much and not relying on that kind of that gut instinct that we have as a teacher. As teachers, those of us who go into education definitely didn't go in it for the money, but although it is our job, right? But all of us were just naturally creative. And if you use AI in the right way, like it can be a very, very creative tool. You've seen these kind of examples. Maybe you come up with a math problem that sounds like it's taking place in your classroom, or maybe you need some quick data sets or something, or some charts or tables about your hometown where you live, and you've gone online, you can't really find anything. So you ask AI to give you some quick samples. Or there's even AI image generators out there that sometimes we just need that picture to help our students understand. Maybe like we've got some students who are ELL in our classroom and they don't understand what something is. You can ask an AI to create an image that you can then put into that problem to help students just visually comprehend exactly what it is you're asking them about. So in one sense, like there's that fear that with how easy AI is to use, that educators might become so reliant on it that they stop trusting their gut and their creativity goes away. But at the same time, I do believe that like AI with that creative teacher, when we start to figure out different ways that we can use it to bring about that student mastery of the content, like that's where we're going to start to see that happy medium of using the tool, but also making sure that we as educators still have that say.
Yeah, and I think it talks about that role that teacher. We've talked about that a couple of times today, that it's allowing us to interact with our students differently. Just focus on the student aspect of it again. Some of these immediate feedback tools, you mentioned Snorkel earlier and some of the other ones, when they get some of that feedback immediately, and I'm not having to spend my teacher time grading it, providing that feedback, the students don't have to wait, they get some of that instant feedback. I think that's powerful for students. Can you speak a little bit about where do you see some of that impact? You've used some of those tools in your classroom. How has that helped student learning, the student motivation to want to continue trying to make sense of the mathematics that they are learning?
We do whole group instruction, depending on the day, between 20, 30 minutes, whatever new content we're learning. And then we always have that small group time, right? And if you teach elementary school or middle school, you implement like a small group model. Students finish stuff when you are working with small groups, and students, when the kid's done with the problem, they might think, I'm done. And then they close it up and then they put the book away when really they got every single question on there wrong. Or they just kept making that one mistake through the 5 practice problems that you gave them. And if you were there, you could have quickly corrected the issue. And then the student would have, hopefully, in theory, been able to get the rest of those problems correct, right? Or at least start to understand whatever concept it was you're teaching a little bit better. So when I use a tool like Snorkel, or again, there's 1,000 other apps that do the same thing. I'm just sharing my experience here. On one sense, if I'm working with 5 students in small groups, knowing that 21 students in my classroom don't always have to stand up and come over and ask like, hey, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? Remember the first few years when I taught where I hadn't really figured out the way to go about this yet? You'd have that line of 17 students waiting at your desk and all they want to see is, hey, did I get this right? And can you give me feedback on it? Again, still an important task, right? That we are seeing how our students are learning this concept or whatever concepts you're teaching. But on the time saving side of things, like that'll be a huge impact that we'll start to see. Because again, if it saves us time and if the AIs or the AI tool, again, whatever it is that you're using, if it's able to give them that specific feedback, in theory, it's just helping them start to learn more. But again, I feel like that's another place where we as the classroom teachers need to be showing them how to use this tool. Just like any other app that we're going to bring into our classroom or any other calculator, if you want to go like old school TI 83s, right? You're not just going to pass it out. You as the teacher, you need to show them, hey, here's how you use this app. Here's how you use this tool to not only get that specific feedback, but also once it gives you that feedback, you actually have to go and change your answer, right? And I do feel like that's another big role that we as the classroom teacher has. Earlier, we were talking about how like no kid just wants to stare at a screen, or it's not good rather for kids to stare at screens for 7.5 hours a day, partly because, hey, guess what? One, we know it's not good for their brains, but also they still need that social interaction. Another place that the teacher can come in there to help the students understand and master that content.
Thanks, Donnie. I so enjoyed our conversation this afternoon and thinking about these AI tools. What are they currently doing? Where could they be headed? What impact do they have on us as educators? What impact do they have on us as students? I think in these upcoming years, we're continuing to learn more and more about AI. But I'm so appreciative of your time today and getting us to start thinking about how can we better utilize artificial intelligence. Thank you for putting up with just me, with my co-host Brenda being unable to join us today, so we don't get her insight into this as well. This is going to conclude this episode of Adding It All Up. We'll see you again next month. Thank you very much for listening.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Adding It All Up. At NCTM, we strive to bring you the biggest topics happening in mathematics. Join us next month for another exciting discussion.
Share your AI classroom experience with the mathematics education community. Submit an article to NCTM's Mathematics Teacher, Learning and Teaching PK-12 Journal. Learn more at nctm.org/mtlt.